Value Impulses with DR. Ulrich Vogel, Personal Diagnostics, Insights, Leadership, Assessments, and Personnel Development.
A warm welcome, dear listeners, to our podcast Value Impulses. Once again, I have a great, interesting guest with me, someone I've known for quite a while now. And he's also a podcaster who actually started out in this medium well before I did. It's my pleasure to warmly welcome, today, André Beier.
Hi Uli, thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, great. This time, it's exactly the other way around. Last time, I was on your show, and we always have interesting topics. Above all, I find your approach really fascinating. It's called HiddenCandidates, your portal, and the very first thing I thought when I heard about it was, what came to my mind back then was, wait a minute, that sounds a bit like Hidden Champions. Or that's just what comes to mind right away, especially when we think of so many mid-sized companies from Germany that are really successful worldwide. And HiddenCandidates was, for me, a really nice association, because I think so often the truly suitable people don't become visible or you just don't think of them. And that's why today we're going to talk a bit about this topic, taking a different approach to recruiting. And so, I think you are a very strong innovator. But maybe we should start at the beginning. You actually come from a different field, André, but then you moved in this direction towards hidden candidates. And yeah, I'm curious, what led you in this direction and how did it all happen?
Yeah, well, basically, we come from software development. For 30 years, I haven't done anything else but convert analog things into digital. And we've been involved for quite a while in the HR consulting and personnel services industry with our software. And about 6 or 7 years ago, I was talking with a buddy and I said, recruiting should work differently. It has to be different. I'm a trained coach and, of course, I also coach people. And I said, yeah, we need to have a completely different approach. So, the concealed job market. Because it's not just when someone quits their job that candidates start looking, but maybe they start gathering information beforehand. So, professionally, repositioning themselves, that was my initial approach. And that it also has to work differently. That means companies should apply to candidates. That was also important to me. And that the candidates are also clear about themselves. And I often notice in conversations that they're not quite there yet, that they haven't found that clarity for themselves. Because when a candidate or applicant is clear, it's obviously easier for the company too.
Yeah.
Right. So, just like profiling values, we specialized in values. There, the candidate is asked to really think about their values on our portal. They actually have to type them in manually, not just pick them from a catalog like Otto's. Because those aren't the real values, as we know, it's about becoming clear about them yourself. We also have coaches who can help with that. That's an optional service. And so, the candidate enters this process where companies first see everything without bias. That means they don't see gender, age, or, which is also important, background. They only see the values and the anonymous profile, and then they apply to the candidate. And the candidate decides.
So that's a completely different approach, and you also do a lot with video. Maybe you could briefly explain for someone who hasn't been on there yet. The customer journey, you actually do it from both sides. So, candidates are on one side, and companies are on the other. You've already hinted at it a bit, and I mean, the background is partly. The job market has really shifted in favor of employees. And that's why you said that companies are the ones applying now. But maybe you could sum up this journey from the candidate side and the company side in a few sentences, just to make it a bit clearer for our listeners.
Sure, happy to. Values are really important to us to start with. And then the candidate submits their anonymous profile. That means names and companies aren't mentioned. For example, you might say, I'm a sales manager. I've been working in this field, I have 5 years of experience, I've built up this and that, and so on. And then he can also, or she can record a video pitch as well. A 90-second video where he or she introduces themselves. Hi, I'm so-and-so, and this is what I'm looking for in a new job. I'm a person with, and so on. Basically, it's an elevator pitch in 90 seconds, which we've integrated into our portal. And on top of that, There's also an asynchronous, time-shifted interview with 6 identical questions. That also means that companies can later compare these answers accordingly.
Oh, so it's standardized. Ah, yeah, that's interesting.
Yes, it's standardized, and I think that's important because often in candidate interviews, different questions are asked for the same target group. And of course, that's absolutely wrong. Yeah, and that's exactly where we offer the opportunity for companies to compare accordingly afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, that's important for a portal like this to have standardization. I think only then, and I mean, you come from software development, I think that's when you really start asking yourself these questions in detail. And you need standards to make it work properly. If I understand correctly, and I enter my profile anonymously, then there are certain search functions available for companies. Or how should I picture it, if we look at it from the company's perspective?
Yeah, exactly. Companies can join us, and at first, it's free of charge. So, you don't have to become a paying member right away. Instead, you just have a look, say, I have the following position open, let's just say a financial accountant. A classic. A classic, exactly, that's a position that's often in demand. Let's see what's available in the portal. And if, at the moment, there's no one available, then there's a search function that automatically sends an email whenever a financial accountant enters the system. But if there is someone, or even several people, available, you can say, all right, I'll check out the profile, anonymously, and if it sounds interesting. Then, only at that point, if I say I want to get to know this person, that's when a club membership starts, a membership, where the company then pays an annual fee and can then contact the candidate accordingly. But it's the candidate who decides whether to share their information, their full CVs, certificates, and so on, even videos. They decide whether or not to open up to company XYZ, to the hidden champions, opens up. Yeah.
Exactly, that's the other side of things, so to speak, and I find it really interesting that the decision is actually in the candidate's hands. Of course, the companies, as you said, can basically apply. They'd like to, so they make an indication, if you will. But then the candidate has to make the decision. And how does it actually continue from there? Shall we take it one step further, André?
Yeah, so let's say the candidate accepts. Right, and then they can meet online in our portal. That happens through the usual video formats, where they can have a conversation. Interviews or in-person meetings are also possible. We support that process, and if the candidate wants, we can also accompany the conversations. It always depends on what the candidate wants as well. And once they've come to an agreement, meaning they've negotiated a contract, then on our end, we receive a commission from the company.
So, just like recruitment consultants, we ultimately work towards closing the deal. But before that, if I understood correctly, there's a kind of small membership from the company's side. That didn't really sound like it was a huge investment either. And from the candidate's side, there's nothing to pay at first. So basically, the barrier to entry stays low and people are interested in joining. How do you actually make this known to the hidden candidates? Candidates. Where do you go? Which channels or media do you use to find people who are interested in joining your portal?
It's mainly through my posts on LinkedIn, but I also use other platforms. Like I said, it's basically my second living room.
You have, I think, over 13,000 followers or something like that. So I think you've really been working hard at this for many years.
Yes, exactly. It's also a tough job, I have to say. It's fun, but sales is set up in a completely different way here, again totally different. And through your posts, you end up finding your community somewhere, that is, your target audience. And of course, that's where a lot of candidates come from. But beyond that, I have to say, we also have a lot of coaches in Germany who also don't know what to do with their candidates. Where should they send them? To bigger job platforms, where in the end they're just a number. But with us, they're actually candidates, where we really highlight what they can do professionally, what values they have, in other words, their soft skills, and that they can also match those accordingly. With the company culture that the companies have also provided. Yeah.
That's exactly what I want to get into again, because that's also something where we kind of overlap in terms of this values-based approach. I mean, values can be defined quite simply. First, just say what's important to you. Values can also, of course, be defined in a very scientific way, like we do at profiling values, and then you can develop sophisticated measurement systems for them. But when If, let's say, a community made up of a company and a candidate is supposed to hold together well, then there has to be a certain overlap in values. I think we can agree on that. And if you look into it again, I noticed a bit on your portal, also on the podcast and so on, there are always people who deal with corporate culture. And sometimes that's a bit like a book with 7 seals. So what actually is corporate culture? Maybe you can give us a bit of insight into your world of values and corporate culture, and how you approach this at Hidden Candidates.
First of all, we have to be educators, essentially, just like you. I also see myself as an ambassador for values. So first, we need to provide some clarification. And of course, we also advise companies in the area of corporate culture so that people first understand what it actually is. What kind of corporate culture is currently in place? And where do I actually want to go with my team? That's also important to consider. And that management, so this corporate culture, always comes from the top down, meaning it's not just dictated, but actually lived and modeled. And I always say, it's not just a project, it's a mission. Corporate culture. It should always be a topic, so that this corporate culture can be nurtured like a flower bed, so that the plants can grow accordingly and eventually blossom or bloom. I think that's really important. And companies can also record a video. Unfortunately, that's still not done very often. At most, they upload the occasional image video. But what would really help is if someone just said, "I'm André Beier, Managing Director, and our corporate culture is sharp," so recording something snappy, so that candidates can authentically get a sense of what the company is really about. And they can also put this down in writing with us, so they can describe their corporate culture as well, so that the candidate can see all of this beforehand, before they share their information. And the companies can also see the values of the candidate on the anonymous profile and say, could this be a good fit? That's how we ultimately put the match together. Yeah.
It's actually quite interesting that you wish companies would go a bit deeper there and really convey a certain authenticity. And also things like that, because otherwise it's just image, it's all glossy. So you want something that really comes across as genuine, so to speak. And then it's probably easier to make a match like that. If I look again at these values you discuss, or rather, that you ask about, how does that work? Do you have a certain selection to choose from? Well, we don't have a car catalog, we've already said that. But how do people approach it? Or is there some sort of guidance for that? Maybe something included to make it easier for people. How should I picture that?
For one thing, we've documented it. We provide questions to help them think about it. So, we provide some material for that. And on top of that, we have a total of 6 coaches working with us, who also, let's say, have a short conversation of about half an hour to start with. That's free of charge, where we can ask, where do you actually want to go? And then there's also a values coaching, where you can figure that out, because that's a process too, and not just, tell me your values. So if I just ask someone on the street, tell me your values, that
isn't warmed up at all.
What does this person even want from me? So that would be totally wrong. That's why it's important to filter that out over several conversations. But there are also some candidates who are absolutely clear and say, I know what I want. And that's good too. But even values change over the course of your life. Which is exactly what you tease out with your testing process, that once a year or however often, you do a sort of standard self-assessment for yourself. Where am I at? Where do I stand right now? And where do I want to go? Yeah, that's also really important, and that's what we do with coaching.
Yeah, so you kind of take people by the hand a bit, and some need more, some need less. That's how I can really picture it, now that you've mentioned it in our earlier conversation. You also brought up this term, circle of trust, which, just by the sound of it, I already find really, really nice. And trust is something that's incredibly important in human society. How would you describe this circle of trust, or rather, why did you choose it as a term for hidden candidates as well?
Yeah, in the end, it's an option for companies. So, I imagine that we need to cooperate much more with each other. Not just the small ones, but also medium-sized companies should cooperate with each other. And what I mean is, let's say you're looking for a manager, and you have 3 to choose from, maybe even 5 if you're lucky. But you can only hire 1 manager. What do you do with the other 4? You send them a rejection. And that's always a negative message, of course, for the candidate as well. And why not say, we're now working together with several companies, where we say, we've got an idea, we're working with the candidates through the portal. Because these candidates are already, as I like to say, at cruising altitude, they're already in the process, they've prepared themselves, talked about their values, and so on, and now they know what an interview is. After all, you don't do that very often, or at least not regularly. You don't look for a new job every day. And that they then, well, come to us. They end up with us through a portal, prepare themselves accordingly, and then are available for another organization. And everyone benefits from that, because there are fewer and fewer workers. And it's terrible, honestly, the amount of effort that all these companies are putting in. That's why we should work together, because one candidate might be interesting for one company, but not for another. I'm not saying I should just send my candidates to the competition. That would be nonsense, that idea. Because they operate in a completely different way. But we do have something in common. I think that we should look at the bigger picture, especially in the current economic situation we're in, and highlight that a bit, saying, yes, together we're strong.
Yeah, I mean, that's something pretty general. If you look at society, if you really consider the concept of cooperation, companies are often strong lone wolves. Of course, that's also because of the competitive economy. On the other hand, I also say, let's take the example of the coaching market or the personnel services market, which you're in. Now, let's be honest, there's actually room for many there. And it's not like, of course, you want to sharpen your profile in terms of what's my USP, my unique selling point. Proposition. But that doesn't mean that everyone else is automatically a competitor. Instead, you should really look at what connects you and what opportunities might arise in the market. I was recently approached about software, specifically what we do, psychometric tools, where a provider actually suggested forming a mastermind group. And so, as market peers, we can actually sit down together and discuss the important issues in the market. So, can I take this a bit as a plea for cooperation from your side as well? In this context, that companies who are searching can definitely cooperate with each other. Or did I misunderstand you? Yes.
Exactly. I mean, why do associations exist? Because they join forces, they connect with each other. Yes, if you just write it out like that, or take a closer look at it. But do they really connect with each other? Do they really connect with each other? We always have nice conversations and all that. But does anything truly valuable actually come out of it? Because the economic experts say, look, we need to prepare ourselves against foreign countries, I'll just put it that way. America, China, and so on. Germany as a business location is at risk. But if we actually accomplish something together, things will get much better. And then we'll also come out of these kinds of crises stronger. And that makes things easier.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And in the end, it's always like this. When we cooperate with others, we basically have more strengths that we can throw into the mix. And it's actually true that you can prove mathematically just how much cooperation brings. By the way, that's humanity's recipe for success. Otherwise, we'd probably still be running around in the trees. But sometimes in the working world, as we've hinted at in a few episodes already, it feels like we've built systems that actually make cooperation harder, that basically prevent it. When I look at certain work environments or even some markets, it seems like they're working against our very human instinct or drive to work together. Barriers are being built up systemically or systematically that actually bring us together with strangers rather than with ourselves. That's why I really appreciate your plea on this topic. And I mean, especially if you look at the mid-sized sector, maybe 2 or 3 companies in a similar industry, say, automotive or something like that, it would actually make sense to work together on recruitment strategies. Is that what you mean as well? Yes.
That's exactly what I mean. I mean it 100%. I'm with you on that. And if we take a look at HR today, everyone is overloaded. They're completely swamped with work. They have to operate 5 to 10 different software systems. And in the end, they're also, let's say, in a bit of a sandwich position. They're getting pressure from above and below and have to mediate everywhere. And I think there's just not much time left for new things, for trying new approaches. But it's important. Yeah, absolutely. and that really needs to be addressed by management as well. Mr. Erler can't do everything either. Just look at all the mass layoffs happening at the automotive suppliers right now. And so on. So now they're just focused on getting people out, writing termination letters, and so on. But there's hardly any room left for new ideas, and that's a shame.
Yeah, exactly. We notice it ourselves too, that the overload in HR has really gotten intense. You can see it in the fact that, in the past, introducing new systems. And of course, for us, profiling values is something we'd really like to introduce. That used to be easier, more relaxed, smoother. These days, it gets postponed more and more often. And yeah, you get the feeling that people are overwhelmed too. That's definitely happened. I can only hope that, at some point, technology that provides even better relief might help with this, but also through increased cooperation. So I think that's an important point.
And now we're back to the point, Uli, that it's really also about company culture. Where do I actually want to go? What are we? Who am I? Where do we even want to go? And for that, I also offer a really quick values and culture check on our websites, which is free of charge. You can just click through about 10 questions in 3 minutes if you want to take a look at your company culture. So, in the end, it's basically a teaser. I'll just have a look at it, it's free of charge, and maybe you can take the next steps from there, just to provide an entry point.
I'd love to check that out. Thank you very much, André, for the tip. So, Hidden Candidates is definitely worth checking out, their website, the portal, and exploring it. Maybe at this point, since we're both podcasters, I'd like to mention something else. As you mentioned earlier, it's been a good 4 or 5 years now, and you've got over 100 episodes. Candidates is. I saw that it's been on the market for 5 years already.
There.
You showcase that nicely on your website, especially when you combine podcasting with Hidden Candidates now. Because that's what we decided to focus on today. What does it do for you? What are the things where you'd say, through the podcast, I was able to achieve so much? I'd also like you to share a bit of your experience with our listeners.
At first, you hardly get any reaction. There are these silent listeners. And when the time is right, they reach out, whether it's companies or candidates. I've heard something about that. Hidden Candidates gets Googled, and it's right at the top spot on Google. Wonderful, then they find us. But I also get. Often I get messages saying, yes, I totally agree with you, or I don't share your opinion, so you start to have discussions and exchanges. Also, the people I invite onto the podcast, I keep learning from them. Many of them have published books, and we dive into those and share them as well. But I've also managed to get TV personalities, like Jared D. Baba, where we just talked about different things that matter to him. Things that affect all of us, especially in the area of diversity as such. And that diversity is also a really big topic in companies where simply not enough is being done yet. We do want to recruit from abroad, and politicians are jumping on board, but I think German companies still have a lot to learn in this area.
Yes, and there's still a lot that's hidden in society as well. That's actually the case. That's why I really like your approach, that we're now making this connection to what's still hidden. Especially when you move away a bit from just the formal requirements. I believe that in our society there's no shortage of talent, nor of the willingness to achieve things competently. I think that, quite often, people are just fishing in the wrong pools. And I think with Hidden Candidate, you're doing something innovative, something new. That's why we've put it on our agenda as well, dear André. Is there maybe something you'd like to add at the end, something that sums it up or serves as a kind of conclusion? What do you think? Yeah.
I just want to say where I want to go. Yeah, so. My vision, even 5 years ago, was to roll this out across Europe. So, the idea is to bring Europe, the European spirit, much closer together, to bring companies closer together with the right candidates that we have. And now, we're in the UK, we now have contacts there, as well as in Austria, Italy, and the Netherlands. And we're still looking for partners in Spain, Italy, Poland, and France. We're still searching for them now. But they have to be the right partners, ones who are a good fit for us, who also share certain values. That's important to us.
Yeah, very, very good. It's great that we were able to broaden the scope there, now, on the European level, which really is extremely important. It truly is. It's not easy, we know that, but it's very, very important. And if we want to continue to make good use of this space in the long run, then we need to work together more, which brings us back to the topic of cooperation. A heartfelt thank you, André, for joining us today on the Wordy Impulse podcast. That was a very, very insightful conversation, and I'm looking forward to our more fruitful collaborations. Take care, dear André.
Thank you very much for the conversation.
You're welcome. Bye.